Jody here, and welcome or welcome back to my channel. And if you're new here on my channel, I talk about Broadway books and television. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about some recent Broadway news, as well as some new Broadway musicals that are set to open on Broadway this spring. So without any further ado, let's get on to today's video. So I say this is recent Broadway news. By the time I put this video up, it's probably going to be not as recent, but you know, I still wanted to talk about it, so here I am talking about it. And so the first thing I'm going to be talking about is The Queen of Versailles. This is a new musical that recently closed on Broadway on December 21st, I believe. And when I first heard about this new musical, I was kind of interested in it because Bennett was going to be in the show, and she hasn't been in a show in quite some time, so that's exciting in itself. And then Stephen Schwartz wrote the score, and it's kind of like a Wicked reunion, this show, because of that, because Kristen Chenoweth was the original Glinda in Wicked, and Stephen Schwartz wrote the music for Wicked, so it's kind of like a reunion for that reason, so that's pretty cool. And I don't really know much about the show other than it had an out-of-town tryout at some point, and that it was based on a documentary of which I have never seen. But the story sounded kind of like a Housewives kind of like story, and as someone who really loves Bravo and the Housewives franchise, I was like, this might interest me, who knows. The show opened on Broadway, and I saw a few clips that the show had put out of what the show looked like. I found myself feeling like a bit underwhelmed by what I was seeing, thinking to myself, you know, if I were to make it into the city, this is definitely not a show I'm any longer interested in seeing. It just didn't look that good to me, sad to say. Came across a few reviews where it didn't sound like the show was that great, and so I thought to myself, I will not be surprised if this show closes shortly after opening. And then sure enough, the show was announced that it will be closing before the end of the year, and then that closing notice got pushed up to December 21st. So by the time I put this video out, the show is no longer on Broadway, but I still wanted to talk about it anyway, so here I am talking about it. Moving on to a bit of casting news, which is that Jonathan Groff is going to be leaving the musical just in time, I believe on March 26th, that he will have been in the show for about a year, which I always find to be super cool and admirable because, you know, doing the same show every day can, I'm sure, be a bit tiring and feel a bit repetitive. So I always love it when performers stay in a show for at least a year because, like I said, I just really admire that. And obviously, it shows that they really like doing the show, which is always nice to see as well. Now, moving on to some new musicals that will be opening on Broadway this spring, starting with Schmigadoon, which is a new musical that will be opening at the Nederlander Theater. This is a musical stage adaptation of the television series that was on Apple TV. I saw the first season and I absolutely loved it. I didn't really get into season 2. I only watched a few episodes. I might return to it one day and watch the remaining episodes, but really fun show. And when I heard that they were going to make this into a musical on Broadway, I was like, yes, I can totally picture this. And I'm very excited to see the show, you know, go to Broadway, and I think it's going to do really well. That's my hope, at least. Alex Brightman and Sarah Chase are starring in the leading roles. And I believe also Mackenzie Kurtz of the Heathers revival, currently off Broadway, is also going to be in the show as well. So it has a really great cast. The musical is the musical stage adaptation of the very well-known film Beaches. This is a musical that I've known about what seems like forever. A while ago, there was a production at the Signature Theater in New York, and then there was a production in Chicago that starred Shoshana Bean in the Bette Midler role that Bette Midler played in the movie. And I kind of assumed when Beaches, the musical, finally made its way to Broadway that Shoshana Bean would play the Bette Midler part, but she's actually not going to be shown, although she will be in another show opening on Broadway this season, which I will be talking about later on. So is going to star Kelly Barrett and Jessica Vosk, and Jessica Vosk is going to be playing the Bette Midler role. Love Jessica Vosk. I think she's going to do really well in this musical. And she's just like so talented and just like a really great performer. Looking forward, like I said, to this new musical coming to Broadway. Beaches will be playing at the Majestic Theater. Now moving on to the next musical that will be opening on Broadway this spring, which is probably my most highly anticipated musical opening on Broadway this spring, which is the musical Titanique. This show, but I was aware of it when it played off Broadway. It was a really popular show when it was off Broadway, and I kind of didn't really understand the concept of the show until I looked more into it after I heard it was going to be on Broadway this spring. The whole concept of the show is just so creative and unique and just so incredibly funny. Basically, Titanique is a parody of Titanic, and in the musical, Celine Dion is like convinced that she was on the Titanic, and that's basically the show. Like I said, it's a parody. Dion being in the show makes sense with the storyline because she obviously sang the theme song to the movie, which is My Heart Will Go On, one of the most popular theme songs for a movie in the history of movies. The show was co-created by Marla Mendel, who will be playing Celine Dion on Broadway, and Constantine Verzulli, who I know played Jack in the off-Broadway production. You know, when I saw clips of the show, it kind of reminds me of like a show that has like a Rock of Ages vibe, in the sense that like the show is like super funny and will make you laugh. It's like this show, I feel like I will laugh the whole time. I truly think Marla Mendel is like the front runner to win a Tony Award this year. I mean, she just looks absolutely amazing as Celine Dion, just like so committed to the performance, and it just looks so good, and I'm like so happy the show is coming to Broadway. What can I say? Now moving on to the last new musical that will be opening on Broadway this spring that we'll be talking about today, which is The Lost Boys, which is a new musical based on the movie of the same name from the 80s. About this new musical, as I never saw the movie, but I do know it takes place in the 80s, I believe, and it's about vampires. Although I have to say the last time a vampire musical was at the Palace Theater, which is where the show will be playing, it didn't do very well. That musical was Lestat. Although I have to say it didn't do very well, but I absolutely love that show. Being said, I do think this show has a good chance of doing well. Shauna Bean is actually going to be in this new musical opening on Broadway this spring. Originally, Casey Levi was going to be in the show, but then she's also doing Ragtime right now, and Ragtime extended its run. So it just was a bit too much at the moment to do. So she decided not to do the show, and that's when Shoshana Bean came in and replaced her in the show. And you know, Shoshana Bean's amazing, so I would love to see the show for that reason alone. Another thing that stood out to me about the show is that James Carpinello and Patrick Wilson are producers of the show, and they're two of my favorite Broadway actors of all time. James Carpinello in Saturday Night Fever on Broadway, Rock of Ages. I saw Patrick Wilson in The Full Monty in Oklahoma. And when I first started seeing shows, their shows that they were in were some of the very first shows that I saw. So this is super cool. I wanted to talk about when it came to specifically the new musicals on Broadway opening this spring that I talked about today. 3 out of the 4 musicals are only scheduled to be limited runs as of now, which I found to be really interesting. Like every once in a while you'll hear about a show having a limited run. Usually they're for plays though, not for musicals. So I found it to be really interesting. It's always a risk trying to take a show to Broadway and having it be successful, but I feel like that's never been apparent more than right now, because I've never heard about so many new musicals at the same time being limited runs versus, you know, open-ended runs. I guess it just shows how risky of a time it is to put a new musical on Broadway, because there's just like, you're just, you know, not sure how it's going to do, I guess. But, you know, there's always a chance, obviously, if these musicals are successful, they could turn into open-ended runs. Although I don't know if Beaches will go on beyond its limited run, because I believe it's going to go on a national tour after that. Or at least I hope Titanique changes that to open-ended run, because it just looks amazing, and I really would love the show to be very successful on Broadway, because it looks so good, and I feel like everybody should see it, including me. Yeah, that's going to be it for today's video. Thank you so very much for watching, and until next time, bye.